thanks very much for joining us this morning. You're in Macedonia,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. Yes, I'm a journalist, former DC correspondent. I lived in the States for a while. I'm now calling in from Macedonia, from Skopje, the capital of Macedonia, in the Balkans, as you said.
And so for people who do not have a clock set to Macedonia time, what time is it right now in Macedonia? It's about 7:15 here. What time is it there?
It's almost lunchtime.
Lunchtime. Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Have you had lunch yet?
No, not yet. This beats lunch.
Okay, that's fine. That's probably wise. People often don't like to do the show with me on a full stomach. It's a bad move. Now let's talk about, because this is a fascinating story. This is a really, really interesting story, but let's set the table, because I think I'm like a lot of people. I didn't know much about Macedonia. So Macedonia used to, don't stop me if I get this wrong, used to be under the Soviet Union, was considered part of Yugoslavia, correct?
Yes, we were not directly under the Soviet Union, but a communist country nonetheless, a socialist country.
In other words, when in the Soviet era, that's
yes,
what I really meant to say. Soviet era, was part of Yugoslavia, and then became an independent country when?
In 1991.
1991. So,
yes.
It's a recent.
Exactly. Yes.
It's a recent country. I have kids who are younger than Macedonia right now.
Yeah, it's an old place, an old ancient culture, but a relatively recently independent country. And Yugoslavia collapsed. We got out of socialism. We were hoping to start building a free market, country economy based on democracy and human rights. And unfortunately, what was waiting for us as soon as we got out of Yugoslavia was that the left regrouped, and they did this to a large extent with the support of George Soros funds. He's funding all sorts of outfits throughout Eastern Europe. His main base is in Hungary, but he's active in the Ukraine now. In Poland, he's organizing protests all throughout the Balkans, from Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia. But he has one of the highest per capita expenditures in Macedonia. He has a particular focus on it.
Let's talk about that. You say that George Soros has spending more per capita in Macedonia than really any other place in Europe. People in the United States, particularly conservatives, are well aware of George Soros. He's one of the big funders of the institutional left, right? Not the biggest necessarily, but one of the biggest. There's other groups like the Ford Foundation, like the Kellogg's Foundation, I've written about extensively, that also fund everything from unions to think tanks to the entire apparatus to media of what we call the institutional left. And people think of that as a phenomenon here. And we associate George Soros with globalism, right?
Exactly.
And Trump has taken on a sort of America first view, which is not negative towards other countries, but his view is if he's president of the United States, he wants to look out for the United States' interest. Now, Macedonia also, coming out of the communist era, has been looking to sort of establish a national identity for itself, right? I want to set the table so people understand what Macedonia is like. How am I doing? Is that correct?
Exactly, yes. We were a country which reasserted its independence after being partitioned by neighboring countries. We have the usual Balkan arguments over identity, over religion, with everybody, around. But we were at least hoping that we were putting socialism to bed after we split from Yugoslavia and tried to rejoin the Western world. Unfortunately, yeah.
Well, no, and Macedonia also, for people who don't know, again, I didn't know much about it. It's also a very conservative country in the American political sense of the word in a lot of ways. For instance, there's an active pro-life movement in Macedonia, too. That's correct, right?
That's correct. We are conservative in social outlook. We have adopted some American-style conservative policies in economic outlook. So essentially our conservative government, the Vimera party, it was inspired in a large degree by the United States, by conservatism in the United States, to the point that we have adopted low flat tax rate of 10%, tax-free zones to spur up manufacturing, easing of the labor laws to make it easier to hire and fire people, and cutting regulatory burdens, to the point that the Heritage Foundation just a few days ago declared us number 31st in the world in economic freedom. So not only in social outlooks, but as well as in economic outlooks, we have tried to, whenever conservatism were given a chance to run the country, we have tried to go to follow the U.S. example, U.S. conservative example, and it has worked well. We have slashed unemployment, we have doubled the economy over 10 years just by introducing free market reforms. So in many ways, we have been inspired by the U.S. and the voters generally vote for the Conservative Party and give it a wide mandate to rule the country. But this is where Soros comes with his attempt to help the former Communist Party, now the Social Democratic Party, take over power, and they do this pretty regularly.
Now, also, I'm going to help our Breitbart News Daily listeners win a game of Trivial Pursuit with this one. But correct me if I'm wrong. There's a street in Macedonia named after Reagan, too,
absolutely,
correct?
Yes.
Right on that?
Absolutely.
Right. So there's a street. By the way, they wouldn't allow that in many American cities at this point. They would not allow Ronald Reagan Street in many cities in America. You couldn't have that. But by the way, you're doing a great job. I think if people, when you hear the Heritage Foundation has named you the number 31st,
31
most free states in the world, then obviously George Soros has to get involved and destroy that. We cannot have that sort of thing. Now, and this was the thing that was most interesting to me. Just so people know you're not a paranoid conspiracy theorist, like most Breitbart News Daily listeners are. We're all whack jobs, right?
I'm setting aside my aluminum cap.
No, so I actually saw people in Macedonia, without irony, actually wearing Soros Army T-shirts. Is that right?
Yes. These are
T-shirts that say they're part of the Soros Army.
Yes, these are the activists on this former Communist Party, which has essentially merged with the sprawling Soros Foundation here. There is the old Communist Party, and there are dozens and dozens of what they call non-governmental organizations, NGOs, which are funded by Soros to the tune of about $5 million a year, and then this is supplicated by several million, up to $5 million a year additionally, coming from the coffers of the United States, usually through USAID, and some other countries also, like the British and the Dutch embassy also support these far-left groups. And, just to show their allegiance, they like to organize protests, which would, be not out of place to an American seeing the Black Lives Matter protests or Occupy Wall Street protests.
Now in Macedonia, you guys have these social justice warrior style protests from people who are part of they call the Soros. So Soros Army is not like a local punk band or anything like that. That's a real thing, a political movement in Macedonia, right, where people proudly wear their Soros Army shirts in their demonstrations. And do they break windows and bust stuff, or is that just an American innovation?
They broke and nearly torched the office of the president. They attacked the Justice Ministry. They tried to storm the Parliament building once, the government building a couple of times. They had dozens of police officers wounded in this violent protest they were organizing over the past 2 years, and they were receiving implicit support from the U.S. Embassy here, considering how the State Department was politicized in its role. I mean, this is the most important thing here. The viewers, the listeners obviously realize how IRS or the EPA were politicized under Obama, but I don't think they have a good grasp of the extent to which the State Department was politicized, and USAID, which is the International Development Agency. And over years, they have been giving grants.
Wait, hang on one second. I want to talk about the Obama connection here in 1 second. But just so people know, you're listening to Breitbart News Daily. This is Lee Stranahan, lead investigative reporter, Breitbart News Daily. On the line right now from the country of Macedonia, we have the vice president of Stop Operation Soros. Now, the Obama administration, we only have a couple minutes here left.
Sure.
So I think people are starting to realize that Macedonia, which is not a country that is talked about a lot in the United States, again, maybe I was the only one who didn't know, but there's a lot of fascinating stuff. It's a country that's adopting conservative economic principles. It's a country that actively low taxes, low regulation,
Exactly.
lionizes Ronald Reagan with a street name there. And George Soros is spending more money per capita in Macedonia than any place else. Now, the Obama administration, explain this part to me. The Obama administration is actually sending money through George Soros to Macedonia. What's going on? What's going on with that? Can you explain? We only get a couple minutes here, but
Sure.
Can you briefly explain the details of what's going on with that?
USAID, the U.S. Development Agency, and the U.S. Embassy here have given tens of millions of dollars over the past several years to George Soros-led groups in Macedonia. They don't give anything remotely similar to conservative groups. They're essentially supporting only one side of the ideological divide in Macedonia. And they were doing this at a time when these groups were organizing violent protests, attacking the police, doing all they can to bring down the conservative government in this country. They give them money for all sorts of activities. It includes media development, so the U.S. is paying for a long list of far-left TV programs and news sites in Macedonia. They even pay for, several $100,000 have gone to essentially a copy of Saturday Night Live going on Macedonian television with the similar talking points, and the similar jokes against conservatives and lionizing the left. They have given money to organizations. Yeah.
We only have a couple minutes left here, and I want to make sure people get this. Tens of millions of dollars in U.S. taxpayer money, correct?
Exactly.
You're saying that money has gone to George Soros to promote a culture of leftism, leftist groups in the country of Macedonia. Is that correct?
Exactly. One of the Soros groups which is receiving U.S. funding is fighting to make abortion more accessible, more easily accessible in the country. Other groups are promoting progressive economic policies, discussing inequality or asking us to make our labor laws more strict or reintroduce progressive taxation. Another group is working on media reform, which is very anti-First Amendment. They're promoting media regulation, which will lead to setting up a committee which is going to evaluate whether you're spreading fake news and essentially close down your media outlet if they decide you are. And maybe one of the worst organizations they're funding, which is receiving U.S. funding and is set up by George Soros here. It's a group of young lawyers who are very active in the migrant crisis, which Europe experienced in 2015 and 2016, during which Macedonia became essentially the external border of Europe. So the US government was paying a group of lawyers to go to the border every day and to help people from Pakistan, Afghanistan, all over the world cross the border more easily and apply for documents which will allow them to continue traveling through Macedonia toward Germany. Contributing to a large extent to the crisis.
We're about out of time here. I want to make sure people get the information. What's the website? Where can they go? Do you have an English language website people can go to here?
Yes, they can visit the stopsoros.mk website. We're trying to update
stopsoros.mk,
yes,
correct?
Exactly.
Just want to make sure I got that right. This is an absolutely stunning story. You're hearing it exclusively on Breitbart News Daily. We make you smarter every morning here. This is the kind of thing that Breitbart covers. We'll be back after this break. You're listening to Breitbart News Daily. I'm Lee Stranahan.